Hello, my name is Chris Alizwad, and I often go by the title Laith Bashar, who is my alter ego and who is the main part of the novel of life. I call myself a novelist of life, and you will hear me refer to the novel of life a lot. This is my first recording for a channel I'm going to be creating on YouTube. I consider myself a multimedia author. I have a lot of fiction on the web, which is interlinked blogs, and each of these blogs also has a podcast in which I'm reading my chapters of my book. The book doesn't begin or end in a certain spot. It begins in several spots and continues through the life of my character Laith Bashar, who is also my alter ego. If I seem a little camera shy my first time, it is because I'm just getting used to this, and I look forward to developing a relationship with my audience and getting to know my audience through comments and just as I have done with my blogs. I consider myself first and foremost an author and a writer, and after that, a philosopher. I would like to just do some introductions this first session and talk a little bit about what I will be talking about on this channel and what interests me and a little bit about my background. I was born in Chicago, and I grew up in a very privileged background. I was really lucky to have been born into the family I was born into. But that's not to say that we didn't have our issues. My mom had a degenerative disease throughout my childhood from the age of 12 until pretty much she passed away she passed away when I was 22, 21, and she was sick with what seemed to be Parkinson's. I cover this in my first volume of the novel of life called Family in Decline, and I'll be giving the web address for these volumes at the end of the session. But you can find these documents of my life on Google by just putting novel of life. You will see my writings. What I do in my writing is I take my past and I fictionalize it in order to digest it. I have used my parents as characters in order to understand them, and it has brought me pretty significant insights about myself and others, and also created a fictional world for me that is something I can understand and something that is a virtual world. I aim to create a virtual world. I'm very inspired by French and French authors, Flaubert, Balzac, who they were graphomaniacs. They were addicted to writing. They were extremely prolific. They wrote volumes after volumes of literature on all sorts of topics. They created Balzac in particular, and Zola, created a whole cast of characters that reoccurred in their literatures, and they revisited these characters again and again and interwove them and wove them into their various narratives, creating somewhat of a virtual world. And what I love about literature is that you can create an alternative reality for a reader and for yourself as a writer. That's what I love about fiction, and what I've always loved about literature is the ability to lose yourself and to disappear into a fictional world, like Alice in Wonderland on the other side of the looking glass. Um, and that's what motivates me artistically. I love the idea of a dream, a dream world, a fictional dream, in the words of um, a writer and critic, Gardner. He wrote a book I have here called Grendel, based on the character in Beowulf, John Gardner. But he called it the fictional dream. You can call it a virtual world, you can call it a fictional world, but the author's genius lies in his ability to create that world. An important thing to know about me is that I'm a recovering addict. A lot of people might not know this about me, that my fiction revolves around, thus far, the chapter of my life based on my adolescence. And once I cover all the chapters in this era of my life, the era of adolescence, I will move on to my young adulthood. But it's a huge task to just cover my adolescence, and I'm not there yet. I'm not finished with it, and I plan on creating a complete history of my adolescence. That's part of the project. And my adolescence is dominated by several events: the divorce of my parents. It is dominated by my addiction to drugs and my mother's sickness, ending in her eventual death. And these three events were pivotal to um, a downward spiral in which I dropped out of college and I became more or less a wandering uh, adolescent, drug user, and just a reckless youth on the run. I lived all across the United States. I was a hitchhiker. I was homeless, and it made for some stories, some amazing stories, and I met some incredible characters. And while I was living this life, I was aware of the fictional quality of it, which is something I explore in the Las Vegas section of my novel of life. This idea that we are all actors, and as Shakespeare said, the world is our stage. In adolescence, you can really get the sense of that. Adolescents are they're very aware of others viewing them, and wanting to be seen by others, and they're always very self-conscious. And there are several stages of several aspects of adolescent psychology, one being the imaginary audience, where an adolescent will think people are watching them at all times. And another stage is the personal fable, in which they think they're invisible. An adolescent will think that nothing can harm them. I think we can all relate to this. As a recovering drug addict, when I was at the height of my addiction, I definitely thought I was invincible. I thought I could walk on water. I have taken incredible amounts of drugs in my life, and I've survived. And my mind at that time was unafraid to die. There's a great line in Peter Pan that really touches me. It's a moment where Peter Pan says, "To die would be an incredible adventure," or "what an adventure it would be to die." And that is kind of like the attitude I had.